Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, vào tháng 4 hàng năm, hòa trong không khí kỷ niệm giải phóng miền Nam mùng 3 tháng 4 và Ngày Quốc tế Lao động mùng 1 tháng 5, hội viên Hội Điện Quang Can thiệp Việt Nam tổ chức hội nghị thường niên. Trong xu thế hợp tác, hội nhập thế giới, chi hội Điện Quang Can thiệp phối hợp với Hội Điện Quang Can thiệp Thần kinh châu Âu ESMIN tổ chức hội nghị Điện Quang Can thiệp toàn quốc lần thứ 7 tại thành phố Hạ Long, nơi có di sản văn hóa Vịnh Hạ Long, kỳ quan thiên nhiên của thế giới. Hội nghị sẽ diễn ra trong 2 ngày 19 và 20 tháng 4. Đây là cơ hội rất lớn để chúng ta cùng nhau cập nhật kiến thức, chia sẻ, học hỏi và hơn hết là để cùng nhau tiếp tục phát triển lĩnh vực điện quang can thiệp trên toàn quốc, giúp cho hội nghị ngày càng phát triển để tạo nên giá trị của chuyên ngành trong chẩn đoán và điều trị bệnh. Đến tham dự hội nghị lần này, về phía hội chi hội Điện Quang Can thiệp và Hội Điện Quang Việt Nam, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu giáo sư tiến sĩ Phạm Minh Thông, Chủ tịch Hội Điện Quang và Y học hạt nhân Việt Nam, Chủ tịch chi hội Điện Quang Can thiệp. Tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu tiến sĩ Trần Trí Cường, Phó Chủ tịch chi hội Điện Quang Can thiệp. Về phía Hội Điện Quang và Y học hạt nhân Việt Nam, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu Phó sư tiến sĩ Phạm Ngọc Hoa, Phó Chủ tịch hội. Tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu Phó sư tiến sĩ Nguyễn Quốc Dũng, Phó Chủ tịch hội. Tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu Phó sư tiến sĩ Bùi Văn Giang, Phó Chủ tịch hội. Về phía Sở Y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu ông Nguyễn Trọng Diện, Giám đốc Sở Y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh. Tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu ông Trịnh Văn Mạnh, Giám đốc Bệnh viện Đa khoa tỉnh Quảng Ninh. Về các giảng viên quốc tế, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu giáo sư Roland Piero, nguyên Chủ tịch Hội Điện Quang Can thiệp Thần kinh châu Âu ESMIN. Cùng đông đảo các thầy cô là các giảng viên chuyên gia hàng đầu trong các lĩnh vực điện quang can thiệp trong cả nước và các bạn đồng nghiệp trên toàn quốc, cùng các báo đài địa phương và trong cả nước. Để tiếp theo chương trình, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu giáo sư tiến sĩ Phạm Minh Thông nên phát biểu khai mạc và chào mừng hội nghị. Xin trọng kính mời.
Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu, kính thưa các vị khách quý. Trước tiên thì xin cảm ơn các giảng viên nước ngoài đã đến tham dự và sẽ có các bài giảng của hội nghị, đặc biệt là giáo sư Laurent Pio. Thank you very much our speakers from different countries, especially Professor Pio, Laurent Pio. He comes from France. He's our friends very for a long time. I know him for 20 years. He helped us for intervention neuroradiology for Vietnam, and up to now he continues to help us for developing the intervention neuroradiology. So thank you to all our speakers from different countries and speakers from Vietnam, and welcome all our members from Vietnam, from north, the south, the center of Vietnam. This time, our Congress organized in Ha Long Bay. The first time we organized out of Hanoi. For previous Congress, we organized in Hanoi, all in Hanoi, and now we move to the different places in Vietnam. This time Ha Long Bay, and the other time in other places in the country. Radiologists, inside radiologists we have intervention radiologist sub-society, and maybe in future intervention radiologists will be the future of radiology, because now, up to now, AI will use in radiology. The first is in radiology, so the role of radiologists time by time maybe change, and intervention takes the role very important. That's why we, Society of Radiology, Vietnamese Society of Radiologists and Sub-Society of Intervention Radiology, we organize different congress and seminar for share the experiences and to invite speakers from different countries and to share knowledge with us for all our members, for all our varieties, to improve our knowledge and to improve our skill of diagnosis and treatment intervention. And I hope this Congress will be successful. Thank you for the attendance. Thank you very much.
Xin trân trọng cảm ơn bài phát biểu chào mừng của giáo sư tiến sĩ Phạm Minh Thông, Chủ tịch Hội. Tiếp theo chương trình, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu giáo sư Laurent Piero, nguyên Chủ tịch Hội Điện Quang Can thiệp Thần kinh châu Âu ESMIN lên phát biểu.
Good morning, everybody. It's my pleasure to be again in Vietnam. As Tong mentioned, we worked together since now. I think the first time I was in Vietnam was 1999, so it is 20 years now. It's a very long time, and as a past president of ESMINT, I realized all the way from 1999 to 2019 with now a large number of physicians attending this meeting, which shows the very great development of radiology in general and interventional radiology in Vietnam. I think it's something very important, and I fully agree with Professor Tong has said regarding the fact that probably interventional radiology is a big part of the future of radiology, because it provides new tools to treat patients with great efficacy and great safety. So I think it's something very important in the field of radiology. For the first time, this meeting is not in Hanoi, but in Halong Bay. I think it's also something very important, showing the great development of interventional radiology, and also giving the opportunity to everybody and also to the speakers coming from abroad to see this very, very nice place in the world. So I just want to express in the name of ESMINT a very nice and very fruitful and very successful meeting to everybody. I hope we will have a good discussion, and it will provide new insight in the field of interventional radiology. So thank you again for inviting us, all of us, and for organizing this very nice meeting. Thank you.
And thank you very much for a very nice and welcome speech from the President Piero in past president of the ESMIN. Tiếp theo chương trình, tôi xin trân trọng kính mời ông Nguyễn Trọng Diện, Giám đốc Sở Y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh lên phát biểu chào mừng hội nghị. Xin trân trọng kính mời.
Kính thưa giáo sư Phạm Minh Thông, Chủ tịch Hội Điện Quang về y học hạt nhân toàn quốc. Kính thưa các quý thầy cô, các giáo sư bác sĩ trong nước và quốc tế. Kính thưa các quý vị đại biểu cùng quý vị khách quý. Hôm nay tôi rất là vui mừng đến dự hội nghị Điện Quang can thiệp toàn quốc lần thứ 7. Thay mặt ngành y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh, tôi xin gửi lời chào nồng nhiệt và lời chúc tốt đẹp đến các quý vị khách quý trong nước và quốc tế, cùng toàn thể các quý vị đại biểu đến dự hội nghị ngày hôm nay. Thưa quý vị đại biểu, thăm khám hình ảnh là thăm khám cận lâm sàng không thể thiếu trong công tác chẩn đoán, mà còn cả trong điều trị với kỹ thuật cao. Do vậy, vị trí của chuyên ngành chẩn đoán hình ảnh và điện quang can thiệp ngày càng được nâng cao và đáp ứng tốt nhu cầu trong chẩn đoán, điều trị và chăm sóc sức khỏe cho nhân dân. Hội nghị điện quang can thiệp toàn quốc lần này là cơ hội quý báu để các bạn đồng nghiệp trong nước và quốc tế học tập, trao đổi, chia sẻ kinh nghiệm, nâng cao trình độ chuyên môn, tiếp cận, học tập và thực hiện các kỹ thuật mới, kỹ thuật tiên tiến hiện đại của các nước trên thế giới về chuyên ngành này. Chúng tôi rất vui mừng chào đón tất cả các chuyên gia trong nước và quốc tế cùng toàn thể quý vị đại biểu tham dự hội nghị được tổ chức tại thành phố Hạ Long xinh đẹp và mến khách. Thay mặt cho lãnh đạo ngành y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh, tôi xin chúc toàn thể các quý vị đại biểu có những ngày tham dự hội nghị bên cạnh kỳ quan thiên nhiên thế giới Vịnh Hạ Long với nhiều sức khỏe, hạnh phúc và có cảm nhận tốt đẹp về mảnh đất và con người nơi đây. Chúc hội nghị thành công rực rỡ. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn. Và về với hội nghị hôm nay, thay mặt cho Sở Y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh, chúng tôi có một lẵng hoa tươi thắm xin được kính chúc và chúc cho hội nghị thành công tốt đẹp. Kính mời giáo sư Phạm Minh Thông, Chủ tịch hội lên nhận lẵng hoa tươi thắm từ ngành y tế tỉnh Quảng Ninh. Mời thầy.
Ban tổ chức xin trân trọng cảm ơn ông Nguyễn Trọng Diện đã có những bài phát biểu chào mừng và có tình cảm rất tốt đẹp đối với hội. Tiếp theo, trước khi chúng ta chuyển sang phần báo cáo học, tôi xin trân trọng kính mời các chủ tọa đoàn, các thầy, các giảng viên và ban tổ chức lên chụp ảnh lưu niệm trước khi chúng ta chuyển sang phần chương trình khoa học. Xin trân trọng kính mời.
Okay, good morning again. We will start the first session dedicated to neurointervention, which is a session organized with Vietnamese Society of Interventional Radiology and ESMINT. I am pleased to share this session with Professor Pham Minh Tong. And we will start with the first presentation by Professor Pham Minh Tong about diagnosis of cerebral ischemic stroke. What's new? So please, Tong.
Tôi sẽ nói cái bài về một số các cái điểm mới trong chẩn đoán cái đột quỵ não. Cái đấy tôi sẽ nói bằng tiếng Việt cho nhanh. I speak in Vietnamese, updates in languages of acute ischemic stroke, but in Vietnamese, so I slightly prepare in English. Now. Chưa cắm à? Chưa cắm đâu? Chưa. Đấy ạ, đấy. Ok. Ok. Chúng ta biết rằng cái đột quỵ não thì đột quỵ chảy máu ít hơn, chủ yếu là nhồi máu, cỡ độ 80% là nhồi máu. Và ở Mỹ ấy, thì là đứng thứ 5 cái tử vong. Ở Việt Nam ấy, thì năm 2008 người ta thống kê đứng hàng đầu của tử vong là đột quỵ não, nhồi máu não. Và chẩn đoán ta có CT cộng từ, chủ yếu chẩn đoán hình ảnh nhé. Thế thì về điều trị ấy, thì tiêu sợi huyết và lấy huyết khối. Thế thì chẩn đoán ta có nhiều các cái phương thức chẩn đoán. CT ta có CT không tiêm thuốc, CT tiêm thuốc, CT mạch máu, CTA, CT multiphase, rồi CT tưới mẫu não, rồi CT để định lượng, CT để dự báo chảy máu sau khi can thiệp, rồi cộng từ, rồi các cái loại. Thế thì CT scan cho đến tận bây giờ thì CT scan không tiêm thuốc vẫn được khuyến cáo là với cái class 1 ấy, class là cao nhất, và cái Avian B, tức là khi mà bệnh nhân đến đột quỵ não thì bao giờ CT không tiêm thuốc. Với CT không tiêm thuốc, người ta sẽ thấy được cái tìm cái vùng tổn thương này, cái vùng các dấu hiệu sớm của nhồi máu não, như là giảm tỷ trọng. Đặc biệt khi CT scan mình sẽ thay đổi cửa sổ một chút, làm cho cửa sổ nó thu hẹp cái cửa sổ ấy, thì thấy rõ hơn cái tổn thương. Đây nhìn rõ khó hơn thì ta thấy được, và thấy một số cái dấu hiệu sớm của cái nhồi máu não, của cái thiếu máu não. Và người ta khuyến cáo là cố gắng chụp CT trong vòng 20 phút. Khi bệnh nhân đến nơi thì cố gắng chụp nhanh, trong vòng 20 phút là chụp được rồi. Và 50% các bệnh nhân đột quỵ não thì nên cố gắng chụp được cho tới 50% bệnh nhân là trong 2 phút đầu là phải chụp được rồi. Thì hiện nay thì bệnh nhân rất là đông, cho nên tất cả các nơi cố gắng. Khuyên cáo của vẫn là class 1, tức là khuyên cáo rất là cao đấy. Và đặc biệt cái CT ấy, thì mình sẽ loại trừ chảy máu. Hết sức quan trọng là loại trừ cái chảy máu. Có chảy máu không? Bởi vì chảy máu và nhồi máu là hai cái điều trị hoàn toàn khác nhau, cho nên phải loại trừ chảy máu và tìm những cái tổn thương thiếu máu. Và ngoài ra thì CT không tiêm thuốc ấy, mình có thể thấy được này, thấy được cái mạch máu nó evidence, tức là nó trắng lên. Và những cái hình mà tăng cái tỷ trọng như thế này ở những cái bệnh nhân mà có dấu hiệu của đột quỵ não thì thường đó là hình huyết khối ở trong mạch máu não, và người ta khuyên cáo là sẽ dùng tiêu sợi huyết, ngay cả trường hợp đó là tiêu sợi huyết. Và CT không tiêm thuốc ấy, thì sẽ đánh giá cái điểm aspect cho bệnh nhân, đánh giá điểm aspect. Và mình nếu điểm aspect mà trên 6 ấy, bằng trên 6 tức là cái tiên lượng tốt, mà điểm aspect mà thấp quá thì tiên lượng tồi. Cho nên mình sẽ đánh giá cái điểm aspect cho cái tổn thương thiếu máu não vòng tuần hoàn trước của đồng não giữa. Đây là cái điểm aspect cho điểm. Ở vùng não sau ấy, thì người ta phải đánh điểm aspect PC aspect, và chủ yếu là trên cộng từ. CT thì khó hơn bởi vì nó có cái artifact nhiều. Và đặc biệt bao giờ cũng có CTA, tức là CT mạch máu não. Đã CT rồi thì không tiêm thuốc thì bắt buộc phải CT mạch máu não. Và khuyên cáo là sau khi mà có dấu hiệu mà nhồi máu và có chẩn đoán chắc chắn rồi thì người ta không đợi đến khi mà có CTA mới cho thuốc, và cho thuốc tiêu sợi huyết và ngay lập tức phải chụp CTA. Nếu như là có CTA á, có máy á, thì chụp luôn, và không có phải chuyển đến nơi có máy để mà chụp cái CTA, để mà xem có cái tắc mạch lớn hay không. Cái hết sức quan trọng là có nhồi máu não, phải xem có tắc mạch lớn hay không. Và CTA phải xem hết cả cái mạch ở trong não và mạch đến tận vùng cổ, từ cái động mạch cảnh trở lên để xem có hẹp cái động mạch cảnh hay không, tắc hẹp động mạch cảnh ở ngoài cổ hay không, đoạn ngoài cổ, chứ không phải CT chỉ xem ở trong não. Và đặc biệt mình có thể làm thêm CT, gọi là CT multiphase. CT multiphase thì cũng đã được làm từ khá lâu rồi, từ những khuyến cáo từ phía trước 2015-16 đã có rồi, tức là CT chụp nhiều pha để làm gì? Để xem cái tuần hoàn bàng hệ. Bởi vì một số nghiên cứu thấy cái bệnh nhân đến sớm nhưng mà cái tuần hoàn hệ không tốt thì nó cũng chưa chắc đã là tốt, điều trị tiên lượng chưa chắc đã tốt. Thế thì CT nhiều pha, đây là cái protocol để chụp CT nhiều pha, mình thấy đấy, chụp 3 lần đấy, chụp từ cổ trở lên, CT nhiều pha và đánh giá cái tuần hoàn, người ta cho điểm để đánh giá tuần hoàn bàng hệ, cho điểm với cái điểm từ 4 đến 5 điểm, tức là tuần hoàn bàng hệ tốt, từ 0 đến 2 điểm là kém, và dựa vào đó để mình tiên lượng. Ví dụ đây là cái trường hợp bệnh nhân 75 tuổi có tiền sử bệnh vành, xong bị đột quỵ để vào viện vào 17 giờ 30 phút và có đau ngực và có liệt nửa người trái và cái ý thức 13 điểm, điểm list 19 điểm. Chụp CT ta thấy có tắc động mạch đắc là M1 bên phải, tắc M1 bên phải, tắc M1 bên phải và điểm aspect 8 điểm. CT multiphase 3 pha, CT multiphase đây thì ta thấy multiphase 4 điểm, tức là toàn làm bàng hệ tốt. CT perfusion, có cái CT TTP, CPF và CPV, và ta có cái mismatch là trên 35%. Bệnh nhân được chụp, được quyết định lấy huyết khối solitaire 620, một lần pass và TC 3 điểm. TC 3 tức là tái thông hoàn toàn. Đấy, solitaire một lần thôi, tái thông hoàn toàn, hệ thống thông hết hoàn toàn. Và kiểm tra lại sau 2 ngày cộng từ kiểm tra lại thì ta thấy có vùng thiếu máu một chút trên diffusion, và cái flare thì hơi trắng thôi chứ không có trắng nhiều, và bệnh nhân hồi phục gần như là hoàn toàn, và như vậy là cái tiến triển khá tốt. Trong khi trường hợp khác, bệnh nhân 57 tuổi bị cái rung nhĩ và điều trị chống đông rồi, tuy nhiên bị đột quỵ và vào viện 2 giờ thôi, điểm list 18 điểm và liệt nửa người trái. Chụp CT ta thấy có tắc đây, có huyết khối đây, và tắc hoàn toàn được một cảnh trong não giữa, tắc. Multiphase thì chỉ có 2 điểm thôi, tức là tuần hoàn bàng hệ kém. Và lấy huyết khối thì tái thông hoàn toàn. Tuy nhiên 2 tuần sau chụp cộng từ kiểm tra thì nó thiếu máu toàn bộ động mạch não giữa, thiếu máu gần như toàn bộ động mạch giữa, và cái điểm morphine scan 4, tức là không hồi phục, tức là rất là tồi. Như vậy thì ta thấy cái tuần hoàn bàng hệ nó ảnh hưởng rất là nhiều đến cái kết quả điều trị. Dù đến sớm chỉ 2 tiếng nhưng tuần hoàn bàng hệ kém, tiên lượng chưa chắc đã tốt. Cái phương pháp CT mới nữa, cái mới của áp dụng của CT scan là tiên lượng cái chảy máu não sau khi can thiệp, sau khi lấy huyết khối. Thì cái này đã hơi mất thời gian, và những cái máy hiện đại mình có thể làm được, mất thêm độ vài phút mình có thể tiến hành được CT. Ta có cái CTP, trên các cái máy mình làm cái CTP, tức là CT tới mô não, và dùng cái Catron để mà đánh giá. Nhưng mà cái dùng Catron này thì một số các máy mới có, một số chương trình có, còn không phải máy nào cũng có. Cho nên mình cũng dựa vào các cái nhà sản xuất ấy, các máy để mình có thể tính được cái này, mình nghiên cứu để có dùng cái Catron để tính được cái tiên lượng. Ví dụ đây là cái hình CTP, đây là cái vùng nhồi máu, vùng thiếu máu, và Catron, và tiên lượng đây, cái tiên lượng đây, cái vùng này là vùng tiên lượng của chảy máu, chảy máu đưa ra đây. Và sau đó chụp kiểm tra lại sau đó thì bằng cái cộng từ T sao á, thì ta thấy có chảy máu. Và như vậy là dùng cái catram mình có thể tiên lượng được cái chảy máu sau khi can thiệp đột quỵ. Ở bệnh mai á, thì chúng tôi dùng cái FEP, tức là CT perfusion cộng với lại FEP. FEP là gì? FEP tức là cái flow extraction production, tức là viết tắt vào phép, dùng cái phép này. Và khi mà tăng á, ở cái vùng mà nó nhồi máu và tăng cái này lên, tăng cái tinh thấm, phá vỡ hàng rào mạch máu não và mình có tiên lượng, thì dùng CT perfusion chụp 25 lần, mỗi lần là trong vòng cứ 2 giây chụp một lần, rồi sau đó thì đi đây 30 giây xong là chụp tiếp 4 lần nữa, và như vậy cái thời gian chụp như vậy. Và người ta thấy trong phần mềm á, qua cái phần mềm nghiên cứu của Siemens có cái phần mềm phép này, thì cái phép này mà nhỏ hơn 0.6 thì là bình thường. Ở cái vị trí mà tắc mạch ấy, mà có phép cắt áp lớn hơn 1,4, chúng tôi nghiên cứu á, trên 60 bệnh nhân thì 80% là có chảy máu. Sau cái can thiệp có chảy máu. Thế thì đấy là cái hết sức mới mà chúng ta đang làm, nhưng mà hiện nay thì còn đang nghiên cứu, chưa đưa vào thực tế. Đây là cái bệnh nhân 78 tuổi, điểm NIS 10 điểm và phép 1.4, 1.49, đo hai bên, đây, tắc hoàn toàn đây, tắc bên phải. Và sau đó, sau 24 giờ chụp kiểm tra lại, thì cái vùng đó biến thành chảy máu. Để mình tiên lượng. Bệnh nhân khác, một 52 tuổi, 52 tuổi, đây. Và mình đo đây CVV phép và sau đó thì cái này 1.7 và rồi cũng chảy máu sau 24 giờ thì ta cũng thấy gì chảy máu, cũng chảy máu. Cái bệnh nhân khác 33 tuổi, bệnh nhân 33 tuổi, điểm NIS 12 điểm, phép 1.0 thôi, đo hai bên ta thấy hai bên đây tắc hai bên và nó chỉ 1.0 thôi, cắt off nó chỉ 1.0 và kiểm tra lại sau 24 giờ không chảy máu, tức là mình có thể tiên lượng được. Và làm cái đường cong rốc thì thấy cái độ nhạy độ hiệu tới 95 và 67% độ nhạy độ hiệu với cái điểm cắt off là 1.4 thì gần đó là đây là ở Bệnh Mai, cái nhóm nghiên cứu của chúng ta đang làm. Mình có thể làm cái này bằng CT 2 mức năng lượng, 2 bóng, bull shock CT 2 mức năng lượng, 2 bóng, thì cái này cũng thấy được, mình nhìn được và có thể thấy được cái tiên lượng chảy máu dựa vào cái vision iodine. Mình bỏ cái vision iodine đi xong mình cho vào và mình có thể tiên lượng được chảy máu. Đây ví dụ đây là cái sequence energy đây, mình thấy cái hình nó tăng trắng lên đây, visual, bỏ cái iốt đi thì nó hết, xong mình lại cho iốt vào thì lại thấy, và chụp kiểm tra lại sau 48 giờ không có chảy máu. Đây cái này thì chụp một năng lượng đây, trắng cả nhu mô não và cả khoang di nhện, xong rồi cho viết truyền vào thì vẫn đi trắng, bỏ iốt đi không thấy iốt, và chụp kiểm tra lại sau 48 tiếng không có chảy máu, vẫn có chảy máu, chụp xong rồi vẫn là cái chảy máu đây, vẫn chảy máu. Như vậy thì dựa vào cái CT 2 mức năng lượng, 2 bóng ấy thì có thể tiên lượng được cái chảy máu sau khi can thiệp cũng là rất là tốt. Tuy nhiên cái này còn đang nghiên cứu, trên thế giới còn đang nghiên cứu và chưa đưa vào ứng dụng, và chúng ta sẽ tiếp tục để nghiên cứu những cái này, để cái rất là mới. Để cái đó để mình sẽ tiên lượng chảy máu sau khi can thiệp đột quỵ. Sau can thiệp mình tiêm thuốc rồi, mình lấy khối rồi thì nó có nguy cơ chảy máu không? Tại mình chụp CT tiêm thuốc hết. Thế thì cái CT perfusion để nghiên cứu thì mình có cái co là cái này, cái cái lõi là cái não đó nó sẽ thường là sẽ chết, còn cái xung quanh là vùng là thiếu máu, vùng thiếu máu, cái vùng ngoài là thiếu máu nhẹ, còn xung quanh là vùng thiếu máu, vùng mismatch. Và nếu mà không điều trị thì vùng penumbra hay vùng mismatch, cái vùng penumbra nó sẽ chiếm hết cả cái vùng vàng vàng này sẽ thành nhồi máu. Và như vậy thì mình dùng cái CT perfusion để đánh giá cái vùng penumbra xem là còn nhiều hay ít. Đây thì ta thấy cái bình bình thường thì CPF cái flow nó khoảng đến 5 đến 60 trên 100 mg phút. CPF nó nhỏ dưới 35 tức là vùng ischemia, và dưới 20 là vùng nhồi máu, vùng penumbra, và dưới 11 là vùng infarct là nhồi máu, vùng đen là nhồi máu, vùng thiếu máu penumbra đây, vùng tranh tối tranh sáng, và vùng này vùng thiếu máu và vùng bình thường. Đây vùng này còn thiếu máu, vùng này vùng penumbra, tức là cái vùng penumbra mình sẽ cố gắng để cứu được cái vùng penumbra đó. Và trong thực tế lâm sàng mình làm CV tui máu não để mình đánh giá cái chọn bệnh nhân để điều trị. Và theo các nghiên cứu thì thực ra thì làm cái CT perfusion làm CT rất là nhanh, tuy nhiên nó lại phụ thuộc vào phải có cái phần mềm, và hiện nay phần mềm được công nhận là phần mềm Rapid của Mỹ, còn các phần mềm khác thì vẫn làm thôi, nhưng mà cái độ chính xác nó chưa chắc đã được đấy, chưa được FDA công bố, chưa được FDA công nhận. Và nhờ cái perfusion này mình có thể chọn được bệnh nhân sau 6 giờ. Trước 6 giờ không làm CTP, sau 6 giờ thì có thể làm CTP để mà đánh giá cái túi mô não để quyết định có làm thrombectomy hay không. Chọn bệnh nhân mà sau 6 tiếng, còn trước 6 tiếng không làm CTP. Cộng từ thì sao? Cộng từ cho số T22 sao để đánh giá chảy máu, diffusion để tìm cái vùng nhồi máu và vùng thiếu máu và nhồi máu, và flare, cái chỗ mà đã trắng lên flare là chắc chắn là nhồi máu rồi, còn diffusion là thiếu máu. Người ta nghiên cứu thấy rằng những cái trắng ở trên diffusion hay tăng trên diffusion thì là vùng thiếu, tôi chưa chắc đã nhồi máu, vẫn có thể hồi phục. Cho nên cái flare mà thấy tức là tổn thương đã gọi là nhồi máu rồi. Người ta dùng flare và diffusion để xem vùng mismatch, để xem cái vùng mà tranh tối tranh sáng, thì flare diffusion. Khi mà có tổn thương trên flare là tổn thương đã sau 6 tiếng, đã sau 3 tiếng rồi. Flare là sau 3 tiếng. Đây T sao người thấy cái huyết khối, thấy mạch máu, T sao, flare diffusion. Đây diffusion, thấy cái nhồi máu đây. Đây ta thấy cái flare, ta thấy cái huyết khối. Và cái diffusion ấy, cái diffusion thì nó rất là nhạy. Diffusion chỉ sau 3 phút đã thấy rồi, đã có thể thấy rồi. Cho diffusion là cái vùng thiếu máu, bắt đầu thấy rồi là 3 phút đã có thể thấy rồi. Và flare thì flare thì người ta nghiên cứu thì người ta thấy này, 15% là sau 3 tiếng là việc thấy, 55% là 4 tiếng rồi, thì 80% là sau 5 tiếng và 95% là sau 6 tiếng nó sẽ tăng trên flare. Và như vậy sau 3 tiếng thì đã có thấy có thể thấy flare trên 15%. Cho nên khi nào mà thấy trên flare tức là cái tổn thương nó nhồi máu, thường cái đã flare là nhồi máu rồi. Và diffusion là flare để xem cái vùng mismatch, cái vùng nhồi máu là flare, vùng mismatch vùng diffusion, và cái vùng thiếu máu sẽ xem perfusion, tí sẽ xem thêm. Và điểm aspect trên cộng từ cũng giống như là trên CT scan. Và trên cộng từ thì bao giờ cũng làm top 3D để xem tắc mạch như thế nào, bao giờ cũng làm top 3D. Đây là cái bệnh nhân 52 tuổi có đột quỵ giờ thứ 2 và liệt nửa người phải, list 20 điểm, và điểm aspect thì 7 điểm, và tắc cái M1 bên trái. Và ta thấy chụp, ta thấy cái diffusion hơi trắng, ADC top 3D tắc đây. Bệnh nhân được điều trị IV và 1 giờ sau thì lâm sàng nó không cải thiện và tiến hành lấy thrombectomy, lấy huyết khối và tái thông. Sau 24 giờ thì lâm sàng nó cải thiện tốt và điểm modified Rankin scale là 1, tức là tốt. Kiểm tra lại tái thông hoàn toàn. Ta thấy cái vùng cái vùng nhồi máu đây, nhồi máu, vẫn thấy cái vùng nhồi máu ít thôi. ADC nó hơi đen, nó đen đây. Thế là bệnh nhân hồi phục. Perfusion trên cộng từ thì cũng giống như là trên CT thôi, thì cũng dùng các cái CBV, CBF và TTP và MTT. Đây là trường hợp bệnh nhân 53 tuổi, liệt nửa người phải và vào viện giờ thứ tư, list 25 điểm, penumbra, vùng penumbra thì rất là nhiều. Đây ta thấy cái vùng thiếu máu rất nhiều, cái lõi thì nhỏ và được tiến hành lấy huyết khối và kiểm tra lại sau 24 giờ thì bệnh nhân hồi phục hoàn toàn. Nhưng mà cái vùng đã nhồi máu rồi ấy, thì nó không hồi phục. Cái vùng nhồi máu rồi thì đây vẫn trắng lên đây, nhưng mà cả cái vùng thiếu máu hết, thiếu máu nó tái thông hoàn toàn, trên thiếu máu hết, nhưng cái nhồi máu thì vẫn nguyên và cái mạch thì thông hoàn toàn. Ta có cái kỹ thuật mới nữa là perfusion ISL. Perfusion ISL là đánh dấu ở nước ấy, từ cổ lên, không dùng thuốc. Tuy nhiên cái đánh dấu này á, thì không có cái CBV, mình có thể áp dụng được cho cái chẩn đoán. Tuy nhiên là hiện nay vẫn còn đang nghiên cứu chứ chưa có áp dụng nhiều cái này. Và người ta thấy đây cái bệnh nhân 77 tuổi và vào giờ thứ 8 và ADC, và cái hình ảnh thì thấy có cái hình tổn thương nhồi máu đây. Đây, và dùng cái ISL đây, ta thấy cái tổn thương vùng thiếu máu đây, và cái flare ta hơi trắng trắng đây, flare đây. Đấy, thì cái flare mà trắng tức là đã có cái tổn thương nhồi máu. Đây là những nghiên cứu. Và dựa vào cái cộng từ và CT tuyến mô não và cộng từ tuyến mô não thì các nghiên cứu các nghiên cứu mới người ta nghiên cứu để tăng cái thời gian để mà chỉ định, để kéo dài cái thời gian chỉ định lấy huyết khối. Đây dựa vào cái kết quả nghiên cứu này, cái kết quả nghiên cứu người ta có thể tăng lên 6 đến 24 giờ. Và nghiên cứu tiếp mình có thể tăng từ 6 đến 12 giờ. Và đây là cái khuyến cáo mới của hội đột quỵ não, của đột quỵ và tim mạch của Hoa Kỳ ấy, người ta có 2018 ấy. Tức là mình có thể dựa vào cộng từ CT cộng từ ấy, dựa vào cái nghiên cứu của Dow và Diffuse 3 để mà kéo dài cái thời gian chỉ định. Sau 6 tiếng mình có thể kéo dài đến 16 tiếng, thậm chí mình có thể kéo dài đến 24 tiếng. Đấy, dựa vào các cái tiêu chuẩn nghiên cứu và tiêu chuẩn của hai cái nghiên cứu này thì mình có thể được. Và hiện nay chúng ta đang tiến hành các cái lấy huyết khối cho các bệnh nhân sau 6 giờ dựa vào nghiên cứu của Dow và Diffuse. Đây là cái tiêu chuẩn của Dow và Diffuse 3 thì dựa vào cái phần mềm Rapid người ta đưa ra thế này. Hiện nay thì chúng ta phải nên mua cái phần mềm Rapid này, Mỹ bán, và chúng ta có thể mua, chắc là bán cho Việt Nam giá bác sĩ ở trong Sài Gòn bạn nào nhỉ? Mình có thể, bạn Khang bạn cho giá có thể rẻ hơn được. Đấy. Thì chúng ta có thể mua cái phần mềm này dùng. Hiện nay các cái máy đều có cái phần mềm để ứng dụng, tuy nhiên chưa được FDA approve. Thì đấy cái tiêu chuẩn Dow mình có thể kéo dài từ 6 đến 24 giờ, tuổi trên 18. Đấy. Và cái nhồi máu của não giữa này, rồi thì các cái điểm mismatch, rồi cái mismatch thì tuổi mà trên 80 ấy, thì điểm list phải trên 10, vùng score thì dưới 21, rồi dưới 80 thì list trên 10 thì điểm score phải dưới 31, rồi tuổi mà dưới 80 thì điểm list có thể đến 20, và ischemic và cái vùng co thì dưới 51. Và cái nghiên cứu thì như vậy mình kéo dài từ 6 đến 24 giờ được. Còn Diffuse 3 thì dựa vào tiêu chuẩn của nó là cái vùng nhồi máu dưới 70 và cái tỷ lệ giữa vùng nhồi máu, vùng vụt và thiếu máu, và cái co, vùng thiếu máu co là phải trên 1,8. Và như vậy thì mình có thể dựa vào hai cái tiêu chuẩn này để mình kéo dài cái thời gian để lấy khối cho bệnh nhân. Quyết định điều trị thì dựa vào hai cái, dựa vào cửa sổ bệnh nhân đến cửa sổ bao nhiêu giờ, và dựa vào cái cửa sổ nhu mô, Từ dựa cửa sổ nhu mô mình xem nhu mô từ máu não như thế nào. Dựa vào hai cửa sổ này mình sẽ quyết định điều trị tiêu dưỡng huyết cộng với lý huyết khối, và mình có thể kéo dài cái thời gian huyết khối, và cái nhiều bệnh nhân được cứu sống. Kết luận thì ta thấy đột quỵ não thì chẩn đoán của cái đột quỵ ấy, và điều trị thì nó được update là thường xuyên. CT không tiêm thuốc vẫn là cái guideline, CT không thuốc cộng với CTA là cái bắt buộc đối với bệnh nhân đột quỵ não để đánh giá có nhồi máu hay không và có tắc mạch lớn hay không. Và CT multiphase thì có thể được tiến hành trong một số trường hợp để đánh giá cái collateral toàn là bằng hệ cộng hưởng từ, và cộng hưởng từ thì có độ nhạy, độ lực cao hơn, và hiện nay các nơi đang ứng dụng nhiều, tuy nhiên máy thì không có nhiều cho nên khó. Cho nên cộng hưởng từ được ứng dụng rất là tốt, dựa vào các cái chuỗi xung để có thể chẩn đoán rất là tốt trên cộng hưởng từ, và CT và cộng hưởng từ perfusion để có thể dựa vào như Dow và diffuse 3 mình có thể kéo dài cửa sổ lấy huyết khối cho bệnh nhân. Và hiện nay nghiên cứu rất mới nhất nữa là mình có thể tiên lượng chảy máu cho các bệnh nhân sau khi lấy huyết khối dựa vào nghiên cứu của CTP từ túi mô não và dựa các phần mềm trên CT. Xin trân trọng cảm ơn.
Thank you very much, Tong, for this very large and clear overview on imaging of stroke treatment. We will continue with stroke treatment with Dr. Nader Soho from Paris, who will present us experience in using solitaire platinum for thrombectomy. Please, Nader.
Merci, Laurent. Thank you, Professor Tongo, for your invitation. So I will not only speak about the solitaire, I will speak about the mechanical thrombectomy in general. So solitaire is one of the main tools for mechanical thrombectomy, but it's not the only one. So I will start the presentation with the stent retrievers. Stent retrievers, what changed about stent retrievers since we begin our mechanical thrombectomy indications? What changed is the patient selection, which is very important. We start to change completely our perspective of treatment with the delay of the treatment and with all these studies that came one after the other. And the tools changed. The tools changed. With the beginning, we had some tools that were not effective in the treatment of mechanical thrombectomy. Then we started to have the solitaire. Solitaire was the first stent retriever to allow us to treat effectively the patients. This was the first line of treatment. This is one of the first indication that we have, and when we can see that there is a difference between the diffusion in the diagnosis of the patient with the flare, but Professor Tong went very largely to explain all these imaging differences. So this is one of the first patients. You can see there is a total occlusion of the M1 here, and we effectively we went up with a micro catheter, and we deployed always we do some injection, selective injection, to see the distal part of the artery if there is no thrombus, and also it allows us to know what is the length of the thrombus that we so we can deploy the stent effectively on the thrombus. So this is the first generation of solitaire, and you can see that you don't see the stent, you see only the extremities of the stent, which was quite a disappointed for us, because we don't know if the stent is open, if the stent is exactly at the position of the thrombus. This is what we can get with the first solitaire. This is the final result. So now there is a platinum solitaire. Platinum solitaire, what changed about the platinum solitaire? You will see in this demonstration video from Medtronic. What exactly changed about it is they changed the length of the stent, which is very important, because the diameter and the length of the stent is important for retraction, for effective retraction of the stent. If you have, personally, I prefer to have a larger stent, so I start to use more and more like 6 diameter stent in the proximal part in M1, and a longer stent, because you have more chances to catch your thrombus with bigger and longer diameter. This parametric design, you see the stent adapts itself to the diameter of the artery, so you have only 2 diameter 4 and 6, and it depends on the diameter of the artery, the stent will adapt itself. Then you have more markers along the stent. You have every 10 millimeter you have a marker, so you can see how much you deploy of the stent in the thrombus. You will see here with the fluoro effect on this animation. Here it comes. You will see that the stent is visible in X-rays. So this is the distal part of the stent, and these are the markers that gets along with the stent. So when you open the stent, the marker will open completely where you don't have thrombus, and where you have thrombus you will see that these markers are not completely opened, and then you know that you are exactly on the thrombus formation. So now you can know that now it's effective, the stent, and then you can pull back with this is the guiding catheter, and you come to the most proximal part of the clot. I will show you later some videos that I did on in vitro. So this is what I explained to you. This is the parametric effect, and these are all the platinum radio opaque markers. And you see also that in the curves, the form of the solitaire with the parametric effect don't collapse. So these are exactly what I show you. So after stentectomy, we come with thromboaspiration. Thromboaspiration, we prefer to take the largest lumen of catheter, so you can impact your clot inside the catheter, the aspiration catheter. Here is an example. This is a patient of 63-year-old with hemiplegia, NIH-SS at 12. This is, you can see that the distal part of the basilar artery is completely thrombosed, and here you can see how far you can get with the 6 French catheter. This is Sophia. You impact the thrombus inside the aspiration catheter while your pump is closed, and once the clot is inside, then you open the pump, and this is how you can get the maximum effect of thromboaspiration. So this is after aspiration. Now what we prefer is to use combined technique. It means we start with thromboaspiration. If it doesn't work, we immediately, we do not wait, we do first, second aspiration. It doesn't work, we put a stent. Here I will show you, this is a retrieval, you can see here the stent, this is the clot, and here you retrieve the clot with the stent and with the aspiration. In this case, I have a flow arrest. It means I used a balloon guiding catheter. So you inflate the balloon guiding catheter in the carotid, so you stop the flow, and then you make the aspiration with the stent retriever. And this, you have an effect, a good effect for aspiration, and you do not lose the clot. Here, another video without the occlusion, and you will see that if you try to put the whole stent with the clot inside the aspiration catheter, you will lose some clot distally because you still have here a circulation. Look, you will lose the clot here, and the clot goes. So this is why, this is how you can have some clots that goes distally. So another technique, without using the flow arrest, without using the balloon guiding catheter, is to deploy your stent, then you retrieve the stent with the clot very slowly inside the catheter, and you will see here, that's it, and then you stop. You do not completely go inside, and then you retrieve everything, and with this technique, you will not lose the clot. The clot still with the stent, and you do not lose the clot. So this is just a technical part of how you do stent retriever with thromboaspiration. I will come to another thing about stent retriever. Stent retriever, we start now to make more indication, especially we didn't have enough study or randomized study on distal thrombectomy like M2. But you have to know this is an analysis of several series. It concerns around 1,600 patients that had mechanical thrombectomy, and you see that there is a high risk of perforation in distal mechanical thrombectomy, around 63%. So this is a meta-analysis of several studies. I will show you an example. This is a patient of 65-year-old with aphasia after coronography, NIHS at 5, and patient was under Plavix and aspirin, so contraindication for IV RTPA. So the only thing with this patient as well, the NIH is questionable because it's not very high, so you cannot do a thing. If I have to do this patient again, I will not touch him because the NIH is not very high, and we took a lot of risk of going with a stent retriever very distal. It's almost M2, M3. And you know, in this position, the arteries, if you retrieve the stent opened, so you can tear some perforators that comes with the artery. So here, this is after retrieval of the clot. This is the final control, and this is the CT after. So you see that we had a tear in the artery, and we had the bleeding of this patient that is under Plavix and aspirin, which is quite severe. We did not give the patient a better outcome. On the contrary, we make him bleed under Plavix and aspirin, and he was NIH 5. So using stent retriever, distally is controversial. Unless you have a high NIHS, then you can do it. If it's low, I personally recommend not to do it. Now I come to this section, and occlusion in tandem. Tandem occlusion, there was not a very good study, randomized study about tandem occlusion, so I will show you at the end what is the actual recommendation of the ISO. So this is an example of tandem occlusion. This is a fluctuating patient. He's 78. He had hemiplegia and aphasia at 3 p.m. The NIH on admission was 23. So this patient had IV thrombolysis and he had total recovery. The NIH was 3. So NIH 3 is good. But at 9 p.m. he started again to have hemiplegia and aphasia with NIH at 24. So we, after IV thrombolysis, we recommended mechanical thrombolysis. This is his MRA, which you see you do not have any more left MCA. This is the diffusion, perfusion, and this is the angio. Angio, you have a occlusion at the origin of the ICA. In this case, what to do? You start by putting your guiding catheter inside the internal carotid to reestablish as soon as possible the circulation distally inside the brain. So here is after we put the Sophia inside the ICA. You can see here you have some clots and you have here occlusion also in M2. So in this case you put a stent reaver. This is the aspect of the internal carotid after we bypass the occlusion, and here we put this is the guiding aspiration catheter. This is the microcatheter with the wire, and then we deployed here the stent, the solitaire stent. After the solitaire stent retrieval and the aspiration, we got a very good result with ATC 2B3. But if you retrieve the guiding catheter, what happens? You see, you start to have occlusion again. That's why this patient was fluctuating. Once it's better, then it starts again to occlude his carotid. So in this case, you do not hesitate. You put a stent at the carotid bifurcation. This is a wall stent at the carotid bifurcation, and we establish a good inflow inside the carotid. So this, you do not hesitate to put a stent in these cases. This is the final control with a very good result. So what is the recommendation actually was European Stroke Organization, the ISO and the ESMINT. We follow the rule of 6. It means the patient NIH above 6, under 6 hours, and with aspect less than 6. We do the best medical treatment and the best and the mechanical thrombectomy. This is the rule of 6 with an infarct call that is less than 70. I will go very quickly on this recommendation because Professor Tong explained it to you with details. We now, between 6 and 24 hours, we follow the recommendation of diffuse endone if the criteria is really good. If you have a good mismatch, between 6 and 16 hours, the patient under 90-year-old with NIH above 6 and volume less than 70, we do the thrombectomy, between 6 and 24 hours, the age we go less than 90 years, we go to 80 years, and we follow the recommendation of the NIH score according to the volume of the infarct, and now also we follow the the volume of the infarct and the NIH. We recommend, the other recommendation is if you have an extensive infarct core, they recommend to do randomized control trials, because until now we do not know if the above 70 millimeter, if we should do or not mechanical thrombectomy. Concerning the distal occlusion, they recommend the mechanical thrombectomy if reasonable in this situation. For sure, as I showed you, if the NIH is not elevated, personally, I prefer not to go and worsen the patient. For basilar artery occlusion is definitively intravenous thrombolysis and mechanical thrombectomy. Concerning the recommendation for the technique, they recommend always to go to a comprehensive stroke center, and always when you do a thrombectomy, try to get TC grade 3. TC2B is not, you do not have a very good outcome with TC2B, so you have to at least have TC2C or TC3. Concerning the technique, they recommend to start always with thromboaspiration and then with the stent retriever. We in our institution, we prefer to do always this, but we do not wait if we see that thromboaspiration is not effective or if it is distal in M1, distal in M1 and beginning of M2, we prefer to do the stent retriever. They recommend also to use the proximal balloon guiding catheter with a flow arrest. Concerning the anesthesia, there is no consensual agreement about if we do general anesthesia or we do only sedation. We used to do general anesthesia systematically, but now we stop the general anesthesia. We prefer to do conscious sedation, and if the patient is cooperating, we continue with constant sedation. It works very well. If the patient is agitated, do not waste time, go for general anesthesia. Concerning the blood pressure, they recommend always to have a high blood pressure between 180 and 105, and especially in the first 24 hours. And for tandem occlusion, the recommendation is always, if you see that you have rearrest of the flow, they recommend to do intraprocedural stenting if it is unavoidable. So in conclusion, now the indication is mechanical thrombectomy combined with the best medical treatment. It's much better than medical treatment alone. We follow the rule of 6. Age is not a contraindication. We extend the indications actually to dawn and diffuse 3 if they follow the criteria. Still question in suspension concerning low NIH, below 6, should we do mechanical thrombectomy or not? We're going to start a randomized trial in France about this. And also with distal occlusion in M2, I think we're going to also make a trial about the distal mechanical occlusions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Nader Soru from Paris, France, for the very interesting presentation. And now I would like to introduce Professor Laurent Pierrot from France, who will present the recent advance in flow diversions with P64 and P48. Professor Laurent Pierrot, please. We should have the comment and discussions at the end of the session, because the time is very limited.
Thank you, Tong, again. So I will now show you the clinical experience we have with flow diverter P64, P48 from Phoenix. You know, flow diversion is now available clinically since 10 years. You know, the 2 first flow diverters were introduced 10 years ago. They were pipeline and silk. And And you know, there was a tremendous development of this technique with new products like Surpass and Fred and Fred Junior. I was presenting last year about Fred and Fred Junior. And now I will show you the experience we have with the P64 and P48. They are currently not available in Vietnam, but they will probably be available during the year, in the middle of the year. So thank you very much for giving me the presentation, but it's not here. No? Okay, thank you. So here are my disclosures, but it's not working. Okay, so I will first start with P64 flow diverter. You know, it's only flow diverter that it's fully controllable, which means that you can fully deploy the flow diverter, and when you are satisfied with the position of the flow diverter, you will detach it. So it's only device like this, and it's indeed something interesting in our practice of flow diversion. Indeed, you understand because the name is P64 that it has 64 wires, and you know, for visualization you have some markers, proximal markers, and you have also helical strands that show you the device. So just to show you how it works, you see here you completely you can completely deploy the flow diverter in front of the neck. And here, you know, you see the device is completely deployed. And if you are not happy with the position, you can completely resheet it, and you can deploy it again in order to change the position. So indeed, it's very interesting. I show you it's more or less the same. You see deployment. Now it's fully deployed. And you see that it's not completely open because it's attached here to the pushing wire. So, but here it's you precisely know where the flow diverter is in front of the aneurysm, and when you are happy with the position, you can detach it by it's a kind of mechanical detachment, and so you will have the full opening of the device. So I will show you some cases we have done just to illustrate this. First, we have this case of large or giant vertebral artery aneurysm, partially thrombosed. You see the thrombosis here on the circulating part of the aneurysm here. And it was, we were deciding to treat this aneurysm with coils and flow diverters. You see placement of the coils and placement of the flow diverter. It's final control after placement of the flow diverter on the coils, and you see we still have some opacification at the level of the neck, which is not a surprise. And it's a control angiogram at 6 months and 1 year, and you see that we have a complete occlusion of the aneurysm. I think we have also the MRI here. You see that there was a decrease between pre-procedure on 6 months, decrease in size, but just partial decrease. At 1 year, you still have a relatively large sac. We will continue to follow this aneurysm to see if there is a decrease of the aneurysm sac in size. Here, another example, it's a very good indication for flow diversion, recanalized aneurysm. This aneurysm was treated in 2000. It was a ruptured PCOM aneurysm treated with coil, but you see that there was this relatively large recanalization. You see it here on the 3D reconstruction. So there was a relatively large recanalization. So just to show you that we have a P1 segment on both sides, and you see the treatment, we decided to place additional coils in the aneurysm sac in order to avoid a new recanalization. We are placing a flow diverter, a P64. You see the P64, deployment of the P64 here in front of the neck. So it is a deployment. We were not completely happy with the opening of the flow diverter. So when you are in this situation, what you can do is you can do ballooning of the flow diverter. We were doing ballooning in the full length of the flow diverter by inflating the balloon in the different position in the flow diverter, and it's a final control. You see here the final control with a complete opening of the flow diverter. There is still some opacification at the neck of the aneurysm, but which is quite usual, and we have here the 6 month and 1 year follow-up, and you see that we have a complete reconstruction of the ICA and a complete occlusion of the aneurysm. So another example here, it's a very interesting example because it's a relatively complicated aneurysm to treat. You see this patient had a normal DSA in 2007. He had DSA because he had bleeding in the basal ganglia. And DSA was negative, by the way, and you see that there was no aneurysm here. And you know, in 2018, this patient had an MRI showing this aneurysm, which is not a saxiform aneurysm. It's a fuzzy saxiform aneurysm, which means that vertebral artery is going inside the sac and is going outside the sac distally. So it's relatively complicated to treat. The strategy of treatment, we decided to put a flow diverter in the vertebral artery in our P64 to place some coils in the aneurysm sac and to check if we have to occlude the right vertebral artery in order to avoid to have a filling of the aneurysm through the right vertebral aneurysm. So it's exactly what we have done. In fact, we do a first procedure which was successful because we had immediately a dissection of the origin of the vertebral artery, so we stop the procedure and we do a second procedure, not by femoral access, but by radial access. We discussed that yesterday evening, so that's the reason why I mentioned that. And through the radial access, we were able to enter the left vertebral artery very easily. And we were placing several microcatheters, one in the vertebral to deploy the P64, and we placed 2 microcatheters in the aneurysm in order to place some coils. Unfortunately, one of these microcatheters inside the aneurysm go down where we are deploying the flow diverter. So we just had 1 microcatheter in the aneurysm, which is not a big issue, but you see here we were placing the coils on the flow diverter, and you see we were not able to completely coil the aneurysm because we just had 1 microcatheter in the aneurysm, and we were not able to coil this portion of the aneurysm. But we were considering that it's what's not really an issue. After the placement of the flow diverter, the P64 on the coils, we do a control of the right vertebral artery, showing that there was still a filling, a large filling of the aneurysm through the right vertebral artery. So we decided to occlude the right vertebral artery. You see we placed some coils here in the right vertebral artery. So finally the treatment was, we do the 3-step, deploying the P64, you see the P64 here, which is completely open, placing some coil in the aneurysm and occluding the right vertebral artery. We have the 6-month DSA, you see, with a very good results. We have a good occlusion of the aneurysm, complete occlusion of the aneurysm, and the left vertebral tree indeed is open. Here it's not contrast in the aneurysm, it's just a vertebral which is doing a loop like this. So another example here, I think multiple aneurysm on the same vessel are also a very good indication for flow diversion. You see here we have multiple 3 aneurysm on the ICA. This one is ICA terminus aneurysm, more or less located at the origin of A1. It was a little a relatively complicated situation. I was not completely sure that placing a flow diverter here was sufficient to cure singularly this aneurysm, so I decided, because ICA terminus, and I will discuss that later on, is a good indication for web treatment, I decided to place a web in this aneurysm and to add P64 in the ICA. So it's exactly what we have done. You see, we were placing the web here in the ICA terminus aneurysm. Then we were deploying the flow diverter in the vessel. You see the deployment of the P64 here. It's not detached, but we will detach it. And it's a final control angiogram. You see here the P64, and you see the web in the aneurysm. And I think it was a way to treat this case. Indeed, in general, in this kind of situation with multiple aneurysm, we don't use web, but just use a flow diverter and add some coils if we think it's necessary. You see here was the treatment, the complete treatment, placement of the P64, which is now completely open, placement of some coils in the aneurysm, and the final control angiogram show a good good opening of the flow diverter, a good circulation in the ICA, and we were waiting for the control angiogram in that case to the follow-up control angiogram, to know if aneurysm are completely occluded. So you may have some complications which are not specific from the P64, but which are related to the technique of flow diversion, which is a delayed occlusion of the vessel where the flow diverter is placed. You see it's a typical indication for flow diversion with a giant ICA aneurysm. You see the aneurysm here. We decided to treat this aneurysm with coils and flow diversion. We place, you see the deployment of the P64 here, complete deployment of the flow diverter, placement of some coil in the aneurysm. The result is okay. The patient is also okay, but you see we do a 6-month DSA on MRI, and the patient is still completely asymptomatic, but we have an occlusion of the ICA on the side of the flow diverter, which can happen. We do nothing because it was too late probably, and we don't know when the ICA was occluded, so in my mind there is nothing to do singularly because the patient is totally asymptomatic. So now we have the P48. P48 is a device, it's what we call baby flow diverter. You know, we have several baby flow diverter now, and P48 is one of them, dedicated to the treatment of distal aneurysm located on small vessels. So you see here, you know, P64 is more or less for ICA aneurysm and proximal aneurysm on M1, A1, and P48 is for more distal aneurysm, singularly, ACOM aneurysm, and MCA aneurysm. I will not go in the discussion of flow diversion in bifurcation because it's still a matter of debate, but I will show you some example of the use of P48. You know, indeed it has 48 19-ol strands. You use it through 21 microcatheter, and you know, what is an interesting point is that you have an independently movable inner wire, which makes that you can push the wire distally if you need some support to deploy the flow diverter. So just to show you this, I don't know if it will work. Yes, it works. You see, it is the guide wire inside the flow diverter. It's a P48, and you see that you can the guide wire it can be moved inside the flow diverter independently from the flow diverter, which is indeed interesting because you can place the flow diverter distally. You see here exactly the same, so I can skip this slide. Here you just see the different sizes of the P48, and I will show you some cases rapidly. You see it's a case, it's an interesting case. It's a rupture, it's a large basilar aneurysm which bled several times, 2 times, you know, in May 2015, on April 2016. On every time we had recanalization, so in my mind it was a good indication for treatment with the flow diverter. You see the situation in November 2018 is not an easy case because you have a very wide neck, this triangular shape of the aneurysm, you have the 2 P1 to preserve, so it was complicated, and the decision was to place a flow diverter P48 in the right P1 on the distal part of the basilar artery. You know, I don't like too much to place flow diverter in the basilar artery, but in this situation, it was in my mind the only option. So we do exactly that. You know, we were deploying the P48 3x18 in the P1 on the distal part of the basilar artery. We were adding some coils in the aneurysm, but you know, there was, you see, we were placing fully the flow diverter, but probably we placed it too distal, and after placement of the flow diverter, you know, there was the proximal part of the flow diverter goes inside the aneurysm. So what we do at that time, we try to recatheterize the proximal part of the flow diverter and to place a stent in the flow diverter on in the distal part of the basilar artery in order to stabilize the flow diverter. So we are using Elvis. I don't know if it's an Elvis Junior because yes, it's an Elvis Junior. You know, we place the Elvis Junior inside the P48, and you know, we deploy the P48 in the distal part of the aneurysm. You see here the P48, the stent, the Elvis Junior, and doing that, you know, we have the flow diverter in front of the neck, and it's a situation at the end of the procedure. I don't have the control as of now, but we are waiting for the control. Here, another example of the use of P48, you know, it's a relatively large ECOM, so we decided to put coils and to add a flow diverter in order to avoid recanalization. You see the aneurysm, you see the treatment, placement of 2 microcatheter, one for the P48, you see the P48, placement of coil in the aneurysm. We were not completely happy with the opening of the flow diverter here, so we decided to inflate a balloon in the flow diverter, but finally it was probably something anatomic. You see, we open it a little bit better, but it's still, there is still a small stenosis here, probably related to the anatomy. It is the end of the procedure, and you see we still have some contrast inside the aneurysm, which is quite usual in this kind of situation. We can have complication also with P48. You know, we treat this irregular large ECOM aneurysm. It's a A1, A2 aneurysm on the left side. So we place coils in the aneurysm and we deploy the flow diverter in the A1, A2 junction. It's a P48 3x12. Everything was okay. You know, the stent is well open, but and it's a control at the end. But he wake up okay without any symptom, but 2 hours after the treatment, he had a right hemiplegia and aphasia. We do immediately a MRI, and you see that there was a small ischemic lesion here in the frontal area. So, and you see that MRI was showing that there was an occlusion of the P48. So we decided to go back in the industry to reopen the left anterior cerebral artery. At the beginning, we tried to use aspiration to aspirate inside the flow diverter, but it was not successful. So we decided to use a balloon to balloon inside the flow diverter. On doing that, we were able to completely reopen the A2 segment on the left side. And you see it's a final control showing that now there is no problem. And you see it's MRI at 24 hours. There is still a small ischemic lesion here, and the patient was MRS 0 at 1 month. What is very important now is coating. You know, there is a lot of discussion regarding the use of coating for flow diversion in order, one, to reduce the rate of thromboembolic complication, and also in order to try as much as possible to reduce the use of dual antiplatelet therapy, which is needed, as you know, for the use of flow diversion. So Phenox has developed his coating. The name is HPC, and it's a very interesting coating. We don't have too many experiences. This flow diverter is now available in Europe. So I will not go into too much detail, but you know, it's an hydrophilic polymer coating, which is supposed to decrease the platelet adhesion. You know, it's some experiments that have been conducted comparing bare flow diverter on coated flow diverter. You see that when you use a bare flow diverter, you have a lot of platelet aggregation, and when you use a coated flow diverter on the bench, you see that you don't have so many platelet aggregation or not aggregation at all. So we do a first case very recently. It's a female 46 years old with a ruptured ECOM coil in 1999. She also had an unruptured right at MCA treated by coiling, then by clipping. And despite these two treatments, there was still a remnant. So we decided to treat this aneurysm with flow diverter by placing a P48 HPC 3/18. You see the coils before the treatment, from the first treatment on the clip, and you see the recanalization here. We treat this recanalization because, you know, it was treated in 2005 when it was unruptured and with coils, but it bleeds after recanalization. So we were thinking that we have to treat this recanalization, and we decided to place the P48. You see placement of the P48 with the coating, P48 HPC. You see different images here. And what is very interesting, you know, we always do 24-hour MRI after the treatment of all aneurysm, by the way, and you see that you don't have any abnormalities on diffusion imaging, maybe something here, but it's very interesting. You know that in a lot of cases, close from 40 to 50% of cases, whatever the kind of endovascular treatment you use, you will have some spot on diffusion imaging after the treatment, and you see that here you have more or less nothing. And I put here two cases, one which was treated with a bare stent, bare P48, and you see that you have several spots on diffusion imaging. On this one, which was the case we have treated 2 weeks ago, and you see that we don't have abnormalities on the diffusion imaging. Indeed, it's just two examples, so we cannot say anything with these cases, but maybe it's an indication that effectively this coating is working. So indeed, further evaluation is needed. Just to conclude, you know, there are new products coming, singularly microcatheter for the deployment of the device, and also the Portal 14 guide wire, which we use now in the department, and which is very helpful. So thank you for your attention. You see, it's a new development of flow diversion, and I think it's an important development of flow diversion because it will allow us to treat aneurysm, also distal aneurysm, when it's indicated with flow diversion, and indeed coating is a very important step in this technique. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Pierrot, for the very interesting presentation. The new diversion. So is very interesting for contains flow diversion. So the next topic, I would like to introduce Professor Nader Soru for the topics blister-like aneurysms, how to treat.
So I will present to you the treatment of the ruptured blood blister-like aneurysms. So what is exactly the blister aneurysm? So it's according to Mizutani classification, it's actually it's a dissection. It's a dissection of the artery, and you have 4 types of dissections. You have the real dissection, focal ectasia, dolichoectasia, and the saccular aneurysm. And the blister aneurysm actually is this one. So you have a lack of the internal elastic lamina inside the blood vessels. You do not have internal elastic lamina, and then you have a fragilization of the wall, and then you have the dissection, and then the dissection you have this small I would say the hole inside the adventitia, which makes the blister-like. So actually, it's a kind of dissection. Okay, so this is considered as the type 4 of the dissection. So what's happened in most of the cases, unless the blister rupture again, which is very, very common, what happens is a spontaneous healing of the arteries within 1 or 2 weeks. But in the case of the type 4 of blister-like aneurysm, what happens is very often 40% of the time it rebleeds within the first days of the bleeding. So it is kind of emergency treatment, so you have to consider it as an emergency, and you have to treat it very soon. But there is not consensual about when to treat the blister-like because of the complexity of the treatment of blister-like, and I will show you this. Don't forget, the mortality is quite high when you have a rebleeding of a blister-like aneurysm. So what are the types of treatment of blister-like? You have deconstructive treatment or reconstructive treatment. Deconstructive treatment, it's either surgical or endovascular. It's surgical, it's trapping. You put 2 clips around each part of the blister-like, but this, if it's an eloquent area where the artery goes to an eloquent area, so you will have a deficit with an ischemia. You can also close the artery. So, for instance, if you have a dissection in one of the 2 vertebrae, if the left vertebral is okay, you can sacrifice the right vertebral by occlusion at the site of the blister or a site of the dissection by putting coils and or a stent retriever. But this is, we come now to the reconstructive treatment. Reconstructive treatment is either to put coils, but usually the blister is a very small aneurysm. you do not have any wall, so as soon as you're going to go inside with the microcatheter, you're going to have a re-rupture. And if you try to put a coil, the coil will go also and make rupture. So the best treatment for us now is to put a stent or coils. I will show you the different method of treatment. So the procedures in our series, not personal, but in our institution series, we used to treat, but from 1 week to 3 weeks, we used to take the patient to treatment, knowing that rebleeding comes in the first few days. So we take risks by waiting the first week. But the problem is we have to put stent. And if you have to put stent, it means you have to put double antiaggregants. Double antiaggregants with a patient that bled early means that you can have rebleeding if you do not have exclusion of the exclusion of the aneurysm. So you have the vasospasm. You have to consider also the drainage that you have to put in the side of the ventricle, because you can have also with double antiaggregants bleeding around the draining of the ventricles. So what is the actually how you say it? What is the actually technique of double antiaggregants that we use when we do this therapy? We used to use clopidogrel, but we discovered that clopidogrel, they have patients that have resistance to clopidogrel. So when you put clopidogrel, you may have occlusion of the stent, thrombus of the stent. So actually, if we take a patient with that is scheduled for a stent, we do aggregation tests before doing the stent, and if the patient do not have resistance, then we keep the patient under clopidogrel. If they have resistance, what we use is Brilic. So if we do not test the patient, we prefer now to use Brilic right away. So we give a loading dose of Brilic the night of the intervention. The morning of intervention, we give another dose with aspirin IV. Then we put the stent and we continue Brilic two per day, every 12 hours, 90 milligram of Brilic for 3 months, and for 1 year aspirin. I will quickly talk to you about Cangrelor. Cangrelor is a new antiaggregant. I will explain to you why now we prefer to use Cangrelor, but Cangrelor is just a new one that cardiologists use. So this is the first case, is a patient, 61-year-old, WFNS 4, and he had a ventricular shunt, so he had, as you can see here, a dissection of the termination of the carotid, which we consider as a blister, you can see here, and we treat this patient at day 7 by putting a pipeline stent. You can see the pipeline stent after installation, and the patient was, the aneurysm was completely gone once we put the pipeline. This is a second case. It's a case of a patient, a 41-year-old patient with Fisher 3, and you can see that he has, you can hardly see, but he has a very tiny aneurysm here in P1 that bled. You see here is the site of the bleeding on the left, and here you will see this small aneurysm. This is a blister aneurysm. So this patient also was treated here, was treated by putting a small pipeline. You can see we put the pipeline and we stop the pipeline really at the origin of P1. We do not like to go in the basilar artery, and Laurent Pierrot showed you in his cases also with P64, we go in the basilar if we are really have to. If you don't have to go to the basilar, we do not go. This is the control of the patient at 6 months with disappearance of the aneurysm. This is another case with Fisher 3 HSA, 50 years old, and this patient had a basilar artery aneurysm, which is very interesting in this patient. Is the first angio was negative, and we did a second angio, and at the second angio you will see that when we did the 3D, look here what appears here. This is a small extravasation of contrast, and you do not see any aneurysm. Actually, it's a blister, and you can see it very well on the 3D. It's a blister on the posterior wall of the basilar artery. So the recommendation when you have a HSA, a hemorrhage, and you have an angio that is negative, you have to repeat the angio sometimes 2 times, and I recommend also to do a 3D, because on the 3D you can see the posterior wall of the aneurysm. So this patient was treated also by a stent. Another case, 50-year-old with also hemorrhage, and here you will see also that the 3D is very interesting, because this is the first angio. The first angio is negative. Do you see anything? It's negative. But look here. This is an A1. It looks normal. When we do another one, look. Now we have a small blister aneurysm that get bigger at day 5. So this patient was also treated with a flow diverter. We put a pipeline, and in this patient we used this drug that it's called cangrelor, and I will explain to you why we use cangrelor, because cangrelor it's a drug that is you inject the cangrelor right away 5 to 10 minutes before you put the stent. You do not have to load the patient the day before or in the morning. So when you start your intervention, you put your microcatheter, and before you deploy the stent, 15 minutes before, you put an injection of IV aspirin and cangrelor with a special pump, with a pump with a special dosage. It's controlled by the weight of the patient. This is the protocol of injection of the cangrelor. And the cangrelor, the advantage of the cangrelor, it's exactly like the Brilic and the ticagrelor. It's a P2Y2 inhibitor. It's a real drug, not a prodrug. It's reversible. This is what it's interesting about. Its short half-life is 3 to 5 minutes. The onset of effect is immediate, and the duration of effect is 30 to 60 minutes. So when you have an emergency treatment to put a stent, you can start to inject the cangrelor, and 10 minutes after it is effective. So you can put your stent, and you keep the patient for 24 hours under a drip. If, because this is emergency, if the patient rebleeds, or if you have to put a ventricular derivation, then you can stop the drug immediately. It's not like the Plavix of Brilic that takes few days to be eliminated from the body. Another type of treatment is surgery. What is surgery? You have 2 types. Either you make a wrapping of the blood blister. It means that you envelope the vessel with a muscular aponeurosis. So you reinforce the wall so it avoid the bleeding, but it is not really very effective. This is how you can do the wrapping. You wrap around the vessel, or you do a surgical clipping. But surgical clipping by reconstruction is quite difficult, and you often have rupture. So I will show you some examples. This is another patient with a very small blister, but it's a very tiny artery. It's a very small artery that comes out from A1. We could not put a stent in this artery. You see, this is the artery. This is A1, A2, and this is the small artery, and you had the aneurysm here. So we couldn't put a stent. So the patient was had a surgery, and this is after the surgery with the clipping. And here it went well. But I will show you another patient that had this ophthalmic micro blister here, and the surgeon said, no, I will operate this patient. We said, okay, we propose to put a stent. He wanted to operate the patient. He operates the patient. He had a rupture where he was putting the clip, and he has to sacrifice the internal carotid artery because he couldn't control the hemorrhage, and the patient finished by dying. So the results of our series of blister, we for endovascular treatment, we did not have any rebleeding during treatment or follow-up, no technical difficulties for stent deployment. We had one transient motor deficit at day 1. This is the patient I showed you, the small blister at the basilar on the posterior wall. He had an occlusion of the superior cerebellar artery because he was resistant to Plavix. And this is why, since this patient, we do not use any more Plavix, we use Brilic or Cangrelor. And we had one cerebellar ischemia after flow diverter deployment because also the patient had a slow response to clopidogrel. And we had one fatal brain ischemia. This is the surgical patient. So blood-brain blister aneurysms, very aggressive behavior. They bleed very often. So you have more complication by surgery than by endovascular treatment. And so we recommend always to treat these patients by flow diversion. Now we use more and more treatment earlier because there is no consent about general consent about when to treat the blister. Some doctors prefer to wait and some prefer to treat early, but there is no consensus about this. There is a risk of spontaneous rebleeding, but if the patient had a poor status clinical or has a vasospasm, the management of the hydrocephalus, so you have to manage all the hydrocephalus and all this before putting any stent because you take risk of bleeding. So in conclusion, the best treatment for us now is to selectively exclude the aneurysm. If the aneurysm is very small, we put only a flow diverter. If the aneurysm is a little bigger or dissecting like the aneurysm of the vertebral that Laurent Pierrot showed you, you can put a flow diverter and you gel a microcatheter and you put some coils, but this is reserved for dissecting aneurysm and not for blister aneurysm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Clanders-Sourou, for the very interesting topic. Blisterized aneurysm, and to treat it is very important. So the last topics, I would like to introduce Professor Laurent Pierrot for the topic updates on the clinical use of the OF device in aneurysm treatment. Professor Laurent Pierrot is the last topics of the session, and then after that we should have some minute for discussion.
Thank you, Tong. So I already have presented here in this meeting last year the clinical experience with, maybe I will have images somewhere sometime, but maybe not. And you know, I will show you the clinical experience and the results of studies in Europe regarding web treatment, but clearly web treatment is one of the most innovative treatments in the field of neurointervention, and the place of this treatment will probably increase with the time. It's not working well. You have a problem. Thank you very much. So, this picture at the beginning of my presentation, and you recognize some of the people here. Indeed, Professor Tong, Professor Liu, Toàn. You know, it's a team of back my hospital, but if I place this picture at the beginning of my talk is because after several years of discussion with microvention and with health ministry of Vietnam, you know, we were able to treat the first patient in Hanoi with a web device in the last 2 days. So I think it's a big achievement. And somebody is missing on this slide, on this picture, who is Karen Ang. I don't know if Karen is in the room, but I don't see her, but she is here. And I have to say something. Karen Ang, for those of you who don't know her, is a microvention responsible for Asia, and she is doing a very important job to introduce all the new technology in Asia in general and in Vietnam in particular. And you know, we were discussing since 1 or 2 years with Karen. Yes, it's important to have web with Vietnam, singularly because, as we know from this meeting, Vietnam is a very active country in the field of neurointervention. It was very important to have web in Vietnam. So after 2 years or 1.5 years, now web is available in Vietnam, and I think it's an important step for the treatment of aneurysm in general. So big thanks to Karen. So my disclosure, which are the same. So intrasaccular flow disruption. What is, briefly, what is intravascular flow disruption? You know, you place an intrasaccular device, which is a little bit like a cage, and this cage will create from inside the aneurysm a flow disruption at the level of the neck, and creating the flow disruption, it will induce thrombosis and aneurysm occlusion. Also, the proximal surface, as you see here, is more regular compared to coils, so maybe it's a better support for neo-endothelium, but you know, we never know if it's really true because we just have animal feedback, not too much human feedback, so we don't know if it's really the point. But the good point of this technique is that, you know, because you place the device inside the aneurysm, the use of dual antiplatelet therapy is not mandatory, and which means that you can use it also in ruptured aneurysm. Let's say a little bit on the contrary to flow diverter, even if I agree with what Nader has said regarding blister-like aneurysm, which is a very specific situation where you have a ruptured aneurysm that has to be treated with flow diversion, but it's a very specific situation. Also, an important point is that you have a very rapid thrombosis of the aneurysm. You know, the experience we have now, we were treating more close from 150 cases in my department with the web, is that after 30 minutes, 1 hour, you have a complete occlusion of the aneurysm. So devices, we have the web, you know, we are supposed to have the lunar artists by Medtronic, but you know, there was a new version of this device presented last year, but it was finally not on. It is finally not on the market due to some technical problems. So I don't know if it will come back. It's not sure. So as of now, the only device we have for intrasaccular flow diversion is the web. So there was a tremendous evolution of the device since its introduction on the market in Europe in 2010. You know, the first version was a dual layer version with one inner cage in the outer cage. And, you know, this dual layer had some disadvantage. It was relatively difficult to navigate, one, and it was relatively rigid, so it was not so conformable to the aneurysm. So the next step was the appearance in 2013 of the single layer device with two shapes, a barrel shape and a more spherical shape, you know, SLS, SL for single layer spherical, you know, and it was a big improvement because it was more conformable and more easy to navigate. And the next evolution was enhanced visualization. You know, at the beginning, what you were seeing with these devices were the distal marker and the proximal marker in platinum. And here, this new version was made with nitinol platinum strands. So you see the full cage. I will show you some example. And in parallel to this technical evolution of the device itself, we had an evolution of the size of the microcatheter to deliver the web, moving from, at the beginning, very big microcatheter to via 33, via 27, which are microcatheter dedicated to the delivery of web, to 21 for the web whose size is between 3 and 7, and now we have the 17 system. So it's you see that it's an evolution over 7 or 9, 8 years, so it's a very rapid evolution, and it's very interesting. So now, if we move to indication for web, the typical indication, probably you remember what I was saying before last year, wide neck bifurcation aneurysm. So the typical location for web treatment is ICA terminus, ACOM, MCA, basilar artery on the top. You can treat, as I said before, ruptured and unruptured aneurysm. A recanalized aneurysm, in my mind, is not a very good indication. At the beginning, one recommendation for use of web was to have an angle between the aneurysm and the parent artery less than 45 degrees. Now, with the new system, singularly the 17, it's possible also to treat aneurysm with angle greater than 45 degrees. So, just to show you some example of the typical indication, ICA terminus is not a frequent location, but it's a good indication for web. You see single layer web, distal marker, proximal marker, proximal marker. You see it's the end of the procedure. You still have some contrast inside the device, but if you wait 30 minutes, we are not waiting 30 minutes because we have not the time, but if you wait 30 minutes, you will no longer have contrast inside the device, and it's a control angiogram at 6 months showing complete aneurysm occlusion. Another typical example, ACOM aneurysm, placement of the web. You see the web here, and you see the end of the procedure. At that moment, you see that there is very few opacification in the device, and you see the control angiogram at 6 months showing complete occlusion of the aneurysm. Another typical example, MC aneurysm. You see the neck is very wide, so it's a very difficult aneurysm to treat. Placement of the web. It is end of the procedure, and it's 6 months control angiogram. Now we have, for this patient, a lot of controls showing a great stability of the treatment. Here, a relatively large basilar artery aneurysm, placement of the web again. You see the web here. You see the control angiogram at 6 months. The result is a little bit worse compared to the other cases I have shown because you have this small neck remnant, but I think the result is okay, knowing that we have to keep the 2 P1 segment open. So are we moving toward an enlargement of indication, singularly due to the appearance of 21 and 17 system? Yes, we can now treat distal wide neck bifurcation aneurysm like pericallosal aneurysm. We can also treat wide neck sidewall aneurysm, singularly at the level of the ICA, carotid ophthalmic aneurysm, PCOM aneurysm. The question is, should we treat narrow neck aneurysm? Indeed, the benefit is probably less for narrow neck aneurysm, except that maybe the treatment has a greater stability compared to standard coiling, but it's still a matter of discussion and evaluation. So just to show you enlargement and finication, a typical pericallosal aneurysm with a relatively wide neck, placement of the web inside the aneurysm. You see the web here. You see that the web is well visible now with night platinum strands. You see the final control angiogram, 6 months control angiogram showing a complete occlusion of the aneurysm. Here another example, ICA aneurysm, carotid ophthalmic aneurysm. This patient has multiple aneurysms. The reason why we treat this one, it's a small one, not easy to treat. We were able to place SL21, not 17, 4/3. It is a final control angiogram. It is control angiogram at 6 months showing again a complete occlusion of the aneurysm. Just to remind you that it's also a good indication for ruptured aneurysm, subarachnoid hemorrhage, PCOM aneurysm, placement of the web. You see at the end of the procedure, it is the results of the end of the procedure, and you see that control angiogram at 1 year show a complete aneurysm occlusion. I tell you that before there was a need to have a relatively soft angle between the parent artery and the aneurysm to use the web, but you see here it's a PCOM aneurysm with a very strong angle, more or less 90 degrees between the ICA and the aneurysm. In that case, it was possible to use the web, web 17. You know, it's a single layer, 6/3, whatever, and you see that it's the end of the procedure. Another aneurysm was coiled, which was ruptured, and you see we were able to place the device. We still have some contrast inside the aneurysm at the end of the procedure. It's a 6 months control angiogram showing a complete occlusion of the aneurysm. So the good thing of web is that it was evaluated since the beginning, since its reintroduction in Europe. And you see there were several studies in Europe. Webcast 2 are 2 European studies. French Observatory is a French study. There was also a study in US under the control of FDA, WebIT. There was another study in Europe recently, Claris study, dedicated to ruptured aneurysm. I will not show the results because they are not published as of now, but I can tell you that the enrollment is now complete, and Laurence Pell, who is the PI for this study, was presenting some results in some meeting, and web is effectively active to prevent rebleeding of ruptured aneurysm. So I will just focus on the 3 European studies that are now published. You know, they were all, these 3 studies, we are more or less including 50, 60 patients. They were all single-arm prospective multicenter study conducted in France and Europe. All data were 100% monitored. All adverse events were independently evaluated by Andy Molineux. All anatomical results were independently evaluated by James Byrne. We have 2 years follow-up for French Observatory, clinical and imaging follow-up. And for webcast and webcast 2, which are the European study, the follow-up will be up to 5 years, which is also quite important. You know, we need to know what is the stability of a new treatment. So I will show you some results we have now at 2 years and 3 years, and we will have, at least for webcast and webcast 2, 5 years follow-up, which is quite important. So it is the list of the participating centers of the 3 studies. These results were published in JNIS last year. Just to show you, it's the cumulated population of the 3 studies. You see that there was 168 patients with 169 aneurysm. Nothing special, except that you see that most aneurysm were wide neck aneurysm. On here you see the location. So the typical location for web treatment are MC aneurysm, ECOM aneurysm, basilar tip, and ICA terminus. So now when we look at the neurological events, you see that there were some hemorrhagic events, even intraoperative rupture with subarachnoid hemorrhage or delayed intracoronal hemorrhage, one case, which means 1.8% of hemorrhagic complication, but in all cases, these hemorrhagic events were asymptomatic. There were 14% of thromboembolic events, but most of them were also asymptomatic, and you see that the rate of thromboembolic event with permanent deficit is just 3%. Now, when we go to morbidity and mortality at 1 month, you see that morbidity at 1 month is 3%, and mortality is 0%. Interestingly, you know, we have the results, I don't have the slide here, but the results of WebIT, the US trial, are exactly the same with the morbidity in the US trial at 1 month, which is 0.7%, and also no mortality. So it seems to be a very safe treatment. This complete slide shows you the flow chart of 1 year, at 1 year and 2 years in the global population of the study. Indeed, it's a little bit complicated, but whatever. When we analyze the safety now at 1 year, you see that the population at 1 year for the clinical evaluation was 153, and what you see here is that morbidity was 1.3%, according to the fact that some patients improved, who had more morbidity at 1 month improve at 1 year. And you see that we have some mortality at 1 year, but mostly unrelated to the aneurysm and its treatment. 1 death was due to cirrhosis, 2 were due to cancer, and only 2 deaths were related to the aneurysm or its treatment. 1 death was due to retroperitoneal hematoma, which is not indeed related to web, and 1 death was due to compression of brainstem by a large partially thrombosed aneurysm, which was, in my mind, not a good indication for web, but whatever. Here we have the population for the follow-up, the clinical evaluation at 2 years. You see that 139 patients were evaluated at 2 years. On its result we have, you know, morbidity was 1.4%. There were 2 additional deaths, but again not related to the aneurysm or the treatment. 1 lung cancer and 1 pneumonia between 1 and 2 years. Now, when we go to efficacy, we have the evolution of aneurysm occlusion at 1 year in 153 aneurysm. And you see the result here. We have complete occlusion in close from 53% of aneurysm, neck remnant in 26% of aneurysm, and which means that you have an adequate occlusion, which is complete occlusion or neck remnant in 79% of cases. Now, when we look at the efficacy at 2 years, you know, we have the efficacy at 2 years in 121 aneurysm. The follow-up was not mandatory at 2 years in webcast and webcast 2. The reason why we have not a follow-up for all aneurysm. you see that we have exactly the same results with 51% of complete occlusion, 29%, more or less 30% of neck remnant, and it means that you have an adequate occlusion of 81%, which shows that the treatment is quite stable along the time. So when we compare web DL and web single layer, we see that there is no difference in the occlusion rate. When we compare also the different location, when we compare the different location, we see also that occlusion rate at 1 year and 2 years is not significantly different, even if we see that there is a higher rate of complete occlusion with basilar artery aneurysm and a lower rate for basilar artery, but it is not statistically significant. Retreatment, the 11 retreatment were done before 12 months and 3 retreatment between 1 year and 24 months. So the final rate of retreatment at 2 years is 9.3%, quite comparable to what we have with standard coiling. Just to show you some illustrative cases, MC aneurysm with a wide neck, with a branch coming from the neck, placement of a dual layer device here. We have a long-term follow-up. DSA at 1 year show complete aneurysm occlusion. MRA at 2 years show also complete aneurysm occlusion. And we have MRA at 5 years showing the great stability of the treatment. Here another example, very difficult MC aneurysm to treat with a wide neck. Placement of flow diverter. You see again a dual layer flow diverter. It is 1 year DSA showing okay, a neck remnant probably, and you see at 2 years and 3 years we have more or less a complete occlusion, which is a very good evolution. Another example here, you see this aneurysm treated with the web. You see the placement of the web here, and we have the follow-up. It's a final control DSA. Showing the placement of the web, which is a dual layer again. You have the 16 months control angiogram. You see that we have a small neck remnant here, but we were obliged to manage an aneurysm like this because we have to keep this branch open indeed. So we don't want to have a protrusion of the web in the branch. And you see that we have a control at 25 months showing great stability of this small neck remnant. Here another example. ICA terminus aneurysm, placement of the web, you know, the proximal marker is in the bifurcation, which is exactly the goal. And when we do the control angiogram, it is the control angiogram at 2 years. You see that we have a neck remnant or a big neck remnant, let's say, but you see that at 3 years, this neck remnant is stable, which is probably the most important point. Another example here, you know, a wide neck MC aneurysm, placement of the web, but you know probably the web was not well placed because the proximal marker is in the aneurysm and it has not to be in the aneurysm but in the bifurcation. We place additional coils just because there was some dye around, some contrast around the device, and it's 1 year control angiogram. There is an aneurysm remnant, but you see that this aneurysm remnant is stable, maybe a slight decrease at 3 years. So indeed, it's not a perfect result, but it's probably because at the beginning, it was probably the beginning of our experience, we placed a too small device in the aneurysm. So in conclusion, long-term follow-up confirms the high safety of web aneurysm treatment. You see that the morbidity at 2 years is 1.5. Indeed, the mortality is 5.1, but mostly unrelated to the aneurysm and its treatment. And you see that there is a great efficacy of web aneurysm treatment at long term, with at 2 years exactly the same results at 1 year. The next step is the 3 months follow-up, but we already have the 3 months follow-up now since a few weeks. And you see that at 3 years, we have exactly the same results as at 2 years and at 1 year. So there is a great stability of this treatment. So again, I think it is a very innovative treatment and a very important treatment for the future for aneurysm management. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Pierrot, for your very nice lecture about web device and erosion treatment. So we should have some minute for discussion. Any question about from floor for all our speaker, all our topic?
I have
for
one
this
question
session?
for Nader.
Okay.
Nader, you mentioned that you like to use the solitaire 6 in diameter, which I think is effectively a good option in a lot of cases. Are you not afraid, however, to have an increase of complication? I have to mention that we do recently, but you say that in your presentation, but more or less. But you know, recently we do a case with thrombosis of the ICA on M1, and we were treating the patient with solitaire 6, solitaire platinum 6, and you know, we had a rupture of the ICA on the CC fistula. So we were obliged to treat the CC fistula during the treatment of what was at the beginning a stroke. So are you not afraid that using a 6 millimeter also is small diameter vessel, you know, even ICA, but I give you an example of ICA because it's the largest vessel we have to treat. But do you think that you are not afraid to have a higher rate of complication with the 6?
It's a risk you take. Anyway, I cannot confirm that it's not a risk. It is a risk that you take. But as I said, we always start by using the aspiration. So if you see that within the aspiration you do not have effective, you do not aspirate anything, and if you doubt that the clot that you have may be a hard clot or whatever, I think you should go for a larger diameter of stent, like 6, because you know that this type of clots are quite resistant. Even with the 6, it might be resistant for retrieval. So I preferably use the 6 more and more, even if it's not solitaire, even if it's embotrap or another type of stent. In M1, I prefer to use the larger diameter. But definitely, I don't go in more, if it's proximal, yes, 6. If it's more distal, in M1, M2, I start with a 4. If it doesn't work, I shift to the 6. But it is a risk. And I have a question for you. For the web you show the complete and incomplete, where you have a remnant at the neck. Don't you think that we confuse sometimes the remnant at the neck with the contrast that fills the middle part of the web device? And it's not a remnant on the neck.
Yes, you're completely right. You know, what I was showing is the evaluation of the core lab, James Byrne, by the way. But I agree with you that, you know, sometimes the result we have can be somewhere considered as complete occlusion, singularly when it's stable along the time, and because it's just opacification close from the neck in the proximal recess of the device, and I am not sure that it's really a neck remnant that has some risk of evolution or bleeding. So I agree with you. I just call it neck remnant because it's the way it was evaluated by the collab at that time. The recommendation for the collab was to have a very strict evaluation, you know, and not to say, okay, I think that it's good, blah, 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 blah. It's not the point. So, but I agree with you that when I show an example with the MC aneurysm with a very small opacification inside the proximal recess, which is stable at 2 years, 3 years. So I think it's effectively something we can consider as a complete occlusion.
I agree with you also, and we should consider this patient as cured, because how many patients you saw with this kind of image
Yeah,
that bled.
Yeah, I think probably among the neck remnant, it is, let's say, 10% of the 10% of the global population. It means that we have 26% of neck remnant, but among these 26%, in fact, 26%, probably we have 10% of them. We are more on the side of complete occlusion. I agree with that.
And nobody bleed from this.
Yeah, nobody bleed. I don't mention that, but in the long-term follow-up, 2 years follow-up, 3 years follow-up, we don't have seen any rebleeding of any aneurysm as of now. So thank you very much. We will, okay, sorry.
Just, it's not a short question for both of you, but regarding strokes, when you're facing a carotid occlusion, as you presented before, what's your approach? Because how do you balloon? Do you aspirate? Because I saw that you had a very good result with a quite clean artery, no stenosis left. So how do you approach that? Because it's something that we're facing and it's difficult. So do you have any recommendation?
I didn't show, I did a case, I showed this case yesterday, but I didn't show it today. I did a case 3 days ago from a patient that had a strangulation attack, and they strangulated him, and he had an occlusion of the carotid. So I did like this, I completely liberate the carotid with aspiration. But at the end, we saw that he had a hematoma of the wall, or maybe an atheroma at the wall at the bifurcation. And in this case, I think the only solution is either to put a stent or to operate the patient in emergency, because it will reocclude. So the strategy is to try to re-establish the circulation as soon as possible for the sake of the brain and to maintain this circulation. So I think the first step is to aspirate the maximum that you can the clot.
Maybe just to complete this question, because you mentioned that using a balloon guiding catheter probably improves the results, which is probably true, but it means that you use balloon guiding catheter for all cases, or?
Personally, I don't use balloon guiding catheter because there are poor catheters. It's very difficult to manipulate them, and it takes you prolong the procedure. And with the technique that I showed with EPIC technique, where you pull back half of the stent, only half of the stent, inside the aspiration catheter, and then you put out very slowly. I can show you, I have a video of this, I can show it to you. It works very well. I showed the 3 slides, 3 videos, one with occlusion and one without occlusion. And it works well without occlusion.
No, we do exactly the same, so I am not against, and I am not completely sure that it's so, when you use on a regular basis balloon guiding catheter, for example, René Chapeau says that it's very easy, blah, 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 blah. Well, it's René Chapeau, but I agree. But I agree that we use, like you, we use aspiration first, but we rapidly move to stent retriever. We don't wait too much. Usually we start with aspiration, and after 5 minutes we have the stent retriever in place in the clot, and we don't use balloon guiding catheter as of now. I agree with you.
The ISO recommendation is to use the balloon, but we don't use it.
Okay, the time is limit, so we close the session here. Thank you very much. Thank you all our speaker. So we have 10 minutes of breaks, of tea breaks, and then come back. Thank you very much. The next session is 10:45. Okay, 10:45. Người ta nghỉ 10 phút.